What episode are we on?
This will be 4. Yeah. So I think we need to, first of all, we need to address last week's episode. The poor quality all round of my awful, my cropping of me webcam, the audio, your Nikon error being thrown up. I don't know. I think it's good. I think it's good that we went with it.
Yeah, I think that, and we've spoken about this a number of times, haven't we? Is like, I think we even said it during the time. You should go with what you've got. You could either complain about mistakes and about how things could and should be, or you can just get it out there and hopefully the context takes over. Which is, as you said, quality was 0, but context was like a few stars high. So
did it say 0?
You said it to me. You didn't say it on the film.
No, I don't even think it. I must at least give it 1 star.
Oh no, sorry, you give it 1 star.
I think it got to the point as well halfway through, like trying to edit it a bit fluidly. I was like, oh fuck it, and it just all went out, no matter what ramblings we went on with, apart from the couple of bits where the camera disconnected. So, but yeah, I think in certain circumstances, this being one of them, the content is more important than the overall quality.
Content is king.
You couldn't get away with that at the end of a wedding, saying it's all out of focus. But believe me, it was, the intention was there for it to be.
But
good.
It's great.
Yeah.
Pictures would have been brilliant. Anyway, episode 4.
Episode 4.
All about the gear. Grey Togs talk. Speak about the gear as you wish. My interpretation is, a few different things. So it's like, what gear can you start with potentially, which we've covered in other ones. But more so, does the gear tend to gain the ability, or is it the person behind the gear that gains the ability? That was my take on it.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. I think there's a couple of points that I've thought about this. There's points where I know I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I was thinking about like my first camera, which I did a bit of Googling before. My first camera was not that I had to Google my first camera, but I wanted to find a picture of it to get it right. My first camera was a Canon EOS 30. I'll drop a picture up when we're looking at it, when this is edited, and it had a stock 28 to 90mm lens on it, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing with it, like at all. And it was film, so like the amount of film that I used was insane to not get anything from it at the end. It didn't even make me cautious because I was deving it in college, and I fucking hated being in the darkroom. I hated deving. I hated deving film. Because I was doing that, it was cheaper than. I didn't have the same thing of going to Boots. I could look at the film and go, well, that's all shite, and lash it away. But yeah, it wasn't. I wasn't very good with it, to be fair. But that was my first. Is it 4A? Oh, that was my first toe in the water when I decided I wanted to be a photographer. It never saw any professional work. I don't know if it would have been capable if it did, but I definitely never did anything professional with it.
No, which is funny really, because while you were talking, I actually got out what was my first camera, proper camera, first SLR, which was a Nikon D5200. Which, to be fair, like, it just gave me that little entry into all the different things. Obviously that wasn't the lens that it comes with. It's actually a very small system, very small camera.
Mate, it's impressive that you still got it. I regret not keeping mine. I'd like it for historical value more than anything.
Well, I only kept it because obviously my small career, as opposed to yours that is, has not lasted as long. Therefore my transitions between different cameras that I've owned hasn't been as far apart. So it was only 2018, 19-ish that I got my first like full frame, like what would you call it? Either a pro or semi-pro, whatever. But I'm quite sentimental about the journey and things like that. So I've on a number of occasions thought, sell this on and enable it to buy me other things that I could probably use, because the reason why I obviously upgraded is because I outgrew this, in my opinion, and it just left me lacking on a lot of occasions. And I did actually use this for a few professional jobs, done a few weddings with it, done a few, loads of things with it, done portraits with it, done scenery with it, done everything with it, landscapes, the lot. And it did an alright job. Obviously, and that brings up the topic of, is it the tools that you use, or is it the person that uses the tools? Because it certainly got me from like total novice hobbyist beginner to actually doing things for paid work and making me think, right, I have outgrown this now and I can move on to the next step. So
what, just for anyone's interest then, whoever does watch this, what's the specs of that camera and what lens is it? What did you start your career on?
That I just basically got the standard 18 to 55 kit lens, which I don't think I've got anymore. I think I actually give that away at a CEX, not a CEX, at a one of them camera, the photography show. I think it's in Birmingham. I took it down to there and swapped it with a different cam that I had to purchase off a friend's mum, and I sold that, the lens and the 18 to 55, just to bump it up by about 20 quid or something. But the specs, I mean, it's just like most modern cameras really. The specs, it goes like, it gives you the right ISO range, gives you like possible frames per minute. I understand, and I agree with specs being, when you get to a certain level, something to look at and think about. But when you're just getting in, I just think like you need to stop thinking what's the absolute best, what's the highest end, what's the megapixel. Because as we know, and I just got a new Samsung phone the other day, as I told you, to Living Daylights about, and that apparently has got a 108 megapixel rear camera on it. Now obviously my full frame camera I think is 24, and you would put them two together and go, well obviously that's better because it's got a more megapixel, but that belief is just a total myth, because it's the processor and how you use it, and the sensor size and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, but that goes back years. That goes back years for phones trying to dazzle people with megapixel count, where it's not.
And they still do. They still do. But I think what I was kind of getting at is, for anyone who's like a kind of novice hobbyist, who's like probably taking pictures on their phones at the moment, which do a good job, I would say, allow you with certain apps to be able to create a decent photo. The transition from any phone on the planet, it could be the best camera phone in the entire world. Once you get on an SLR camera of any capable depth, which is pretty much all of them now, the world apart between this photo and this photo taken in a raw image, as you know, is just a totally different ball game. So that's why I could rant about the stats and the details about that as much as I want to. I wouldn't be able to relay them all off the top of my head, because I kind of give up on thinking what they were and just did what it could do. But I went from having the 1855, and this is what I mean about sentimental, to the first lens that I was bought. So someone gave me this, Becky gave me this as a gift, a 35mm 1.8. It was like the first lens that opened my eyes to like, oh my god, depth of field is like a real thing. That was that. So that was one that I kept. And then I had something else, can't remember what the other thing was, and then I ended up with this 18 to 140, which did an alright job. It just got me that extra length and extra depth, and it cost a lot more than the other two lenses combined, so inevitably it was a better, more well-rounded, more usable, viable lens to keep on the camera, and it never really left it after that, to be honest with you. And don't get me wrong, it isn't the greatest. I think the lowest aperture it goes to is like 3.5. So obviously it's not even like a 2.8 or a 1.8 or anything. So yeah, so I went through a lot of different things, and I built up through lenses. I think that's a good idea as well, to build up through lenses. I think when people get something, it's like the credit card slave generation now. If you're like a potential hobbyist photographer, you probably go out and go, right, I reckon there'll be people genuinely who'll go out today and go, right, got a credit card there with like a $5,000 limit on it or whatever, what camera can I get? And they might spend a little bit of time maybe rummaging around of like kind of what's popular and things like that, but what they'll tend to get back is like feedback of what's popular at the moment is like the kind of pro level ones that you'll have, like the R5s and stuff, and Sonys and Nikons and whatever camera it may be, and they'll purchase a camera that's like £2,000-3,000, but not have a single clue what to do with it. And I think that's, you know, obviously it might lend you the test of time of like growing into it if you continue to keep up at it. But I think, and this is what I was thinking about the other day, is like it's nice to be able to grow with what you've got. So it's almost like a benchmark of levels of, you know, when I was at that 18-55 kit lens on it, I reached a certain point where I thought I can do better, I could get this, and then I got that 35, and then I was working with that for a little bit. I understood a little bit more, looked into a little bit more detail of the different, you know, science and theory behind things, and I thought, right, I've outgrown this now, I can get this. And that creep up of levels is like self-certification as well, in a little way, of like, you know, am I moving in a direction, or am I just kind of staying still? Because I think the opposite, if you got like the best all singing, all dancing, best ever camera you could get, and then you didn't really know how to get the most out of it or how to use it, it might put you off. Because obviously the better they get, the technically, you know, functional they get.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said about like people just going out and spending it, because I'm on a couple of R5 forums with it being a new camera, kind of wanted to know some of the kind of issues other people were having with it. Now, don't get me wrong, one of my previous kind of jobs dealing with people's technology problems daily just shows how much people fucking moan without being patient about something, versus some people will live with something and never realise it's wrong. The amount of people on this forum who will come on and say, just bought an R5 with a 100 to 500mm lens and this, any tips on how to use it? And you're like, it's mad that people have gone and spent that money without asking that, like, going in first. I mean, I saw that camera. I'll go back in a second and talk about kind of my journey up with cameras, but I saw that R5 and those specs, and it ticked a load of boxes for me that my current camera didn't. Some of it was unnecessary, but some of it was like, that's what I want from a camera. And it wasn't necessarily like me going, that's going to make me better, but there were certain things on that camera that I wanted in a camera, and therefore I went for it. I ordered it, pre-ordered it, and it, you know, took however many months to arrive. But
yeah,
that element of getting something that you don't necessarily understand is, no, that's wrong to say that you don't understand. That element of I don't think so. No, because it's really patronising.
No, I think
it's really patronising
right.
to say that you don't understand.
I think there's a posy. It is patronising, but it's very real as well. I think because there'll be people getting it because they'll go, right, okay, what, you know, everyone's recording in 4K 60 at the moment, 60 frames per second, and they'll be thinking, right, what cameras do that? So they'll go out and get it, and you might well be able to like put it down and record something in 4K 60 or whatever, but then they might have like a Samsung and, you know, 300 quid laptop, which is just never going to get anywhere near the files, and it might put them off. That's what I mean. So you can't, like, you knew you wanted that because you understood the specs, you understood its capabilities, how it could take your production value up probably, you know, all that, but you understood it. Whereas if you don't understand it, I think you can catch yourself out, and then you're treading a fine line between wasted money.
The guy I was working for got like an invite to a Canon event in Manchester, and we went along, and it was like the 1DX. I think it was the 1DX. It might have been a 1D. Might not even been a 1DX. It was one of the first amazing, really, really high end, like digital SLRs, like insane money. I think it was like 6, 7, 8 grand or something. And then I remember seeing this 5D, and I was like looking at it, was chatting to the fellow, I was like, oh, you know, it's not full frame, is it? And he went, oh yeah, it's full frame. And as soon as he said it, I was like, that's my camera. That's my jumping off point. I was already earning money from photography. I felt that was good enough to kind of get a foot in the door with other clients, as well as the guy I was working with, we could learn it. I had a full studio I had access to, and it wasn't cheap, like, but like I could justify it because I was earning money as an assistant. I had a regular wage coming in through photography, and I went to Calumet, which is now Wex, sat down with a guy who just knew me as Bill Alford's assistant, and put this package together for me with 5D Mark 1, 24-105 f4 lens. I'm pretty sure I got a flash head with it, and I have still got, although I bet you I can't put my hands on him now I'm saying it, no idea where they are now. I've still got the memory cards I bought with it at the time, 2 gig Lexar CF cards, and the whole package came in at like, I don't know, I want to say around £3,000 or something, which was insane. You know, I was like, for me, early 20s, never spent that much money on anything in my life. Got a finance deal on it through a really good company called Photolease, who are still going, and I've used them since. And I bought this gear, and that was like a jumping off point for me. And then within the year from that, maybe 18 months, I shot everything on this 24-105, and I was doing a lot of studio photography at the time, and it wasn't like depth of field, or shallow depth of field, I should say, wasn't really a big issue, because we were shooting a lot of like we were doing product shots and stuff like that, which was generally, it was all meant to be in focus or all meant to be sharp. So the fact that it wasn't shallow depth of field didn't really matter. And I know, say it was about 18 months to a year or so, I got a Canon 70-200 2.8, the first gen of that. But I had that lens for nearly 10 years. That lens saw me across 2, maybe even three bodies of cameras, and then that was like me opening up for when I kind of dipped my toe in for weddings. I was like, this is now a setup that's going to do both. I mean, I could have totally shot weddings on it. Well, in fact, I did shoot weddings on just the 24-105, but then when I had the 70-200, that 2.8 on the telephoto, and you're seeing those shots, and you're like, that crispiness, that depth of field, that makes a difference. And again, I had that for that. I just lived on those 2 lenses for a couple of years, and then I decided I wanted an f1.2, and I really wanted the 85mm 1.2, but I couldn't afford it. Like, even though I was adding it to my lease, I didn't buy it outright. I was just banging it on this lease I had. I went for the 50mm 1.2, and that was just an absolutely beautiful lens. But what I found out was, within a few months, I didn't use it anywhere near as much as I thought I would. And it sat in the bag, and I've got this real thing. I mean, I am kind of sentimental, like you were saying before, but if something's just sitting there on a shelf and it's got value, I can't justify it. I want to sell it and buy something that's gonna get used and go through daily use. That might be going off on a tangent now. We talked about last week about hiring gear, and I'm definitely say hiring gear is always a way if you can't afford to buy a lens. But what I will say is my approach has been, if I've had the money or I've had a way to finance it, hiring gear can be expensive. Like, you know, it can cost you 50-60 quid a day sometimes for some lenses. Whereas my theory was, I looked at what this lens was going to cost me and what are they going for second hand, and if that was in the region of like £300-500 cheaper than it would be if they sold £300 or £400-500 cheaper than the retail cost of the lens, I could use that lens for 6 months and then sell it for way cheaper than it'd cost me to rent it for a month or so. And like, I've always felt like if you hire a lens to try it out, you're forcing yourself into using it, like forcing yourself to go out and find something to shoot. Or whereas for me, I like having a lens with me that I go, this will be the lens I want to use now, and not forcing myself to utilize it. And again, that's a luxury thing. You know, I've been lucky enough that I can do that, but I'll always, you know, if it's me, I'd always rather buy it, try it, and sell it and recoup the money that way than hire something and kind of be forced down that route. But it's, some lenses I've kept for years, others I haven't kept for very long. You know, I think it's important to, again, all YouTubers that we see who've got those amazing shelves behind them, like mine have got Star Wars helmets on them, but where they, you know, they've got the boxes and stuff, the lenses and stuff of, like, I'd love that. I'd just love a shelf full of all the lenses that I'd had. But it doesn't, you know, my career hasn't dictated
wouldn't it?
that.
Yeah, it'd be nice, like, but, you know, the truth of it is, like, that again comes down to like the posiness side of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you've reached a position where you're able to do that, then great, you know, and you've got that kind of in your arsenal. But if you're just kind of like getting into it, or you're starting out or whatever, or you might have like a YouTube channel going, what are you going to do? Buy like 3-4 lenses with your first camera that you've never used before and set them all up behind you?
Do you know what, just to interrupt you, I watched the video today because I'm using this Atomos Ninja, which I bought a few months back, and I've dabbled in it, and it's so I can have longer record times. And I was watching a video today of a guy talking about the features of his R5 with his Atomos Ninja, and he was talking about stuff, and then he was like, I can't show you this now because I'm recording on my camera. And I thought that's nice that he's talking about something that he's not got in front of him. You know, it's like, I mean, I could pick up a microphone and go, blah, 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 this microphone, because I'm not recording with this microphone. Whereas he was honest enough to say, no, I'm basically saying, I haven't got two cameras. I've got one camera and I'm using it to make me videos now. And I like that honesty, certainly in this kind of the YouTube generation that's just about kind of flex. Yeah, it's flexing, isn't it, about what's going on. Like my thing I'm buzzing off most is that charger I was showing you before, just to charge 2 batteries at once. But again, for me, certain things are a necessity. Like being able to charge, like these batteries on the R5 take a while to charge, and when I come in, if I like shoot all day, and then I've got to charge them before I get up and go back out the next day, I'm up way later than I want to be. So being able to charge with my normal charger and another charger that charge multiples, that's essential for me. That's the kind of gear that makes the difference in how your workflow is and how happy you are at the end of the day, because your equipment's got to make your life easier. Like, you don't want it to make it harder. I'll show you the box, because I don't know where the actual thing packed away somewhere. I bought one of these A10 minis. Interestingly, this is the box for a Pro. The guy bought it. I've just covered up the stickers because it's not a Pro. But I bought one of them. Thinking, this will be ace. I can plug 3 cameras into it. We can set up when we're shooting the tutorials. And I can just switch between cameras. Anyway, it turned into a fucking nightmare. Made life a misery on me edit. Nothing went smoothly with it, because I didn't know what I was doing with it. Like, do you know what I mean? And I understand you have to kind of...
lies the lesson.
Yeah. Well, it's like me using this recorder now. I'm using it now, which again, it's been turning off on me, and I'm like, why the fuck's it doing that? But at least that's not going to be doing that when I'm working with a client with it, because I'm going to have figured out what setting I've not done properly. You know, like, it's too easy to get something and go head first into it, thinking it's simple enough to use, when realistically, you know, the actual switcher is amazing. We had it hooked up to a 42-inch telly. It was really fucking sweet clicking it, watching it change full screen. But then when all the audio was out, or when it was picking up bad quality audio, and luckily I mean, as it was a test, I was still recording to the SD cards in the cameras, so it was savable. But you couldn't do that on some jobs. You know, it's about get something that you can use, and that's going to let you learn with it.
And I think that was close to what I was saying before about starting off like that as an entry level. Don't just think you've got to get the best to be the best. You know, get what you can to get you to be the best, I think, is the kind of the story that you want to be writing for yourself. You know, and also, as we both know, and anyone who's even had dipped a toe in the water, even looking at, not even owning photography before you start actually making any money back, which, you know, sometimes never happens. If you're lucky, sometimes it happens after however long. You know, it's an expensive hobby, so it'd be absolutely stupid to go out and buy something that's ridiculously overpriced that you don't know how to operate. You know, to keep within your means as well, as you said before. Forget the flex world of, like, you know, what's the best thing I can get to look like I know what I'm talking about. And there's a little bit of that goes into, like, I've been at weddings sometimes, even with this newer camera that I've got now, the full frame one, and thought some of the guests have got technically better cameras than I have, but that doesn't necessarily make that they're a better user of that camera. You know, they've probably got them all set on auto, potentially, I don't know that, I'm not putting them down. But, like, would they... It's like that situation where he said, you know, Barcelona are the best team in the world, but can they do it on a rainy night at Stoke? You know, that, like, stupid analogy that someone made once. But it's the same thing, like, you could have literally... And I think there's loads of YouTube videos about it now, you know, £10,000 camera versus £200 camera, you know, but a pro's operating the £200 camera and an absolute beginner's operating the 10. Who gets the better footage? You know, and there's a real argument for that, of, like, get what you can get, what will help you grow and understand and learn. You know, when you tend to get a bit higher up, they tend to become a bit more manual anyway. And if you don't even know to it automatically help you, you'll struggle. And then you'll probably fall out of love very quickly. You'll end up maybe reselling it a few months after you've got it, and you might destroy your whole dream before it even began, which is not very nice to think about, but it probably happens.
Yeah, and I may have touched on this already, but like primarily, I'm a photographer. I'm just lucky enough that I do some video work with a client who's very patient with me learning along the way, and I've took that knowledge and I've worked on other projects for other clients. But I rely heavily on autofocus because I'm running at least 2, if not 3 cameras at once, and I'm moving around making sure everything's working, and the audio's me absolute Achilles heel, to be fair, but like I rely on autofocus. Now I got the opportunity a couple of months back, I remember I sent you the picture of using a Canon C100 Mark II, proper cine camera, and it's an absolute beast. The fundamentals of it made sense to me, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, frame rates, all that. I was like, well, that all makes sense. And I set it, we recorded it, and when I watched it all back, it was all out of focus. Like it was that simple. And I was like, and then I was reading up on stuff, and they were like, you can't use, well, not that you can't, some of the stuff in the videos I watched afterwards, like the viewfinder's not the best thing for checking your focus on one of these cameras. You need a monitor on top. So, that was the next stage, was to stick the monitor on top and get it right for next time. Or these cameras, the autofocus only works with certain lenses, and we were using like some cheap 35mm, I can't even remember what it was, but it was autofocus, but just not with this camera. And, it was like a wasted afternoon. I was lucky, again, understanding clients and knew we were testing it out kind of thing, but that element of not knowing what you're doing, like I'm quite confident in where I'm at in my career and what I can offer someone, to the point that if certain things need doing, I'm willing to throw the net out and get a team in to do it. I'm not naive enough to think I can do every job by myself. And I'm willing to get people involved to help me to produce a better product. I'm not just going to be arrogant enough to go, well, I've done this with this, so I can pick up this camera and do this. I've had a couple of ideas about me and you when we get to go out together and, photo challenges with each other's gear. It's not, ultimately, once you know what you're doing with something, you're going to produce good results. But the difference is, can you produce them under pressure? And within a time frame kind of thing, without that time to learn. Because if I reset my camera to factory settings and just give it to you, you're not going to be able to pick it up. You're not even going to be able to figure it out as fast as I did when I first got it, because I've been using Canon systems for years, so I know the menus, whereas you don't. And the same with me, with yours, with Nikon. I wouldn't have a clue what I'm doing. People to this day still ask me to look at PCs for them. I'm like, no, I don't know anything about fucking PCs. Well, you used to wear blah blah blah.
Well, forget about Nikon to Canon or the other way around. I went from this camera, which is kind of like a do-it-all-for-you camera, like an entry-level, it takes a nice photo for you if you set to certain things. It does have a manual control, which helped me to go from like kind of auto to that manual world, which is every photographer's like dream of when they're actually learning. But even going from this, the button layout, like not necessarily the menus, but the button layout, was totally different to the one that I've gone to. So even that to that was hard. And obviously I've got my eyes on these new mirrorless Nikons, haven't I? I know that their camera system, the button layout and what each button does is going to be different, and it's just one of those things. But I think that's a good idea, actually. That was an idea that I had a long time ago, but not even just like me or you, like you or anyone, or me or anyone, like other amateur photographers around the city that are easy to like kind of meet up and just have like a, what did you call it for? What did you say it was? I call it a shoot off.
I don't think I called it anything, did I? But I'll just give you a little, but for me, an example that I told you I chew on barbecuing into every episode. I entered an online burger competition, and I got my 9-year-old daughter to film it for me, and she did a really good job. Now, she did a really good job because she listened to what I explained to her at the beginning, but she also did a good job, not to take anything away from her. She did a good job because I give her the camera set to do what I wanted her to do with it. So it was on 120 frames a second, image stabilization was on, set aperture, auto ISO. Takes a lot to balls that up. What was important was when I explained to her what shots I wanted, she managed to get them, and frame it up and stuff like that. But the story from years ago from my mentor, Billy, who had a client moaning at him about the shot, and he kept trying to explain it to Billy badly, and he got that frustrated with Billy in the end. He went, "I'll come and take it myself then," and he walked over and he went, "Well, where's the camera?" And basically Billy had these big 4x4 soft boxes all around this I think it was a jewellery setup if memory serves, and he had a 5x4 camera with extended bellows because he was shooting at f45 or f64 or something like that. But the point was the client walked over and he's like, "Where's the camera?" So he thinks he can do better, but can't even recognise where the camera is in this. All right, it's a bit different now because this is going back to 5/4 film. We're talking 20 plus years ago when this incident happened. But also lures people into a false sense of security. Like you're saying, the higher up you get, the higher up the kind of the food chain of technology, the more you need to know about doing something manually. Like I couldn't go and operate a manual approved. I couldn't operate a C100 Mark II without spending some time with it because I just thought I could leave it and go and operate one of the other cameras while I was flitting about. But there's too much about, if it's going to do everything for you, then you don't have to learn anything. Whereas if you want, again for me and I know for you, there's a lot of stuff that
technology, isn't it?
Yeah, but you look at something the way I do, which is I want to learn how to do that, and once you get to that point that you've learned how to do it, you want to get better at it, and then you'll see something else in the meantime, and that's how you start building up kind of your arsenal of what you can provide to a client, and that's good. That there's always an element of learning involved, whereas I just think sometimes it's too easy just to rely on auto for some people, and that's where I probably never gave my Canon C30 enough time when I was starting out. I fell in love with when I realised we could scan negatives and I could edit in Photoshop. That was the best thing in the world for me because I hated being in the darkroom so much. But I never gave that enough chance. But then when I got my 5D and I absolutely fucking loved it, I used that I used that for about 4 or 5 years until I got the Mark II whenever that came out. But interestingly, I shot a wedding maybe 2 years ago. And I didn't have a second camera at the time, and I borrowed a 5D Mark I and used that as my second camera. Now, it had, I think the highest ISO it did was 800 or something, and there was 4 buttons on the back of it as opposed to I was using the 5D Mark IV at the time, which was covered in buttons and all these options, and I was so used to having all this functionality and controlling things dead quickly that I wasn't used to going into a simplistic menu system and navigating through to change things. But then there wasn't that much to change. But bottom line is I got some fantastic images out of it that I got from having, I think I probably had the wide lens on the 5D1 and had the telephoto on the 5D4, but apart from it only producing, I say only, the size of the megapixels 12.7 coming out of the camera, the actual images were good because I knew what I was doing with it. And that came from probably muscle memory of remembering how long I shot with one for, but also from experience of just using a camera for that. The most thing I'm inexperienced of at the moment is video. And it's weirdly what I'm doing most of, but it's touched on it last week. My most regular client comes up with all these batshit crazy ideas for us to do stuff, and half the time I have to learn them, unless it just comes down to I haven't got time before the deadline of the video. I have to learn them, and that's really good. It's really good to have a client that'll push you like that, or a friend, or someone you follow on Instagram or something like that's going to give you an idea to just have to go and learn with whatever equipment you've got.
And that's definitely something, it is what you've got, not what you could get or could have. It's that comes back to that thing before about you can have an absolute nobody on a very expensive camera or a professional on a very cheap camera. The level of work would come through. But it's just that argument, isn't it, of the gear. What is it that you need? And when I say need, we have this conversation all the time about what you need versus what you could do with. You know, and when you were saying before, when you were touching on that you went to do a wedding and you had your 2 cameras, you had one as a second body. I always used to, well, I got to the point of being able to take 2 cameras with me, luckily, by having 2 cameras, brought with me one. And then, after a little bit of time passed, I found that I'd take that with me, just in case, that one. But, quite often, I would just leave it in my bag, and on a harness I'd have this main camera which I'm shooting on now, the D750. That would be kind of a backup spare, and on this other half of my harness I'd have like, you know, some sort of portable light, or you know, a bag full of like accessories like extra batteries and memory cards and whatever. So I was actually shooting weddings with 1 camera, which some people might think is an absolute, you know, you can't do that, like you need to have a backup, or you need to have the ability to switch from, you know, a prime lens to a, you know, zoom lens or whatever. But this again comes into like, what do you need? Because the lens that's on the Nikon that I have now, my best camera, my best setup that I've got, is a 24 to 70, and that typically gets me through most of the day for how I shoot, because I know loads of people shoot differently, and that's another thing, you know, it's what works for you. But when I'm in, like, say, the getting ready part, the bridal prep, or if it goes a little bit darker or whatever it might be, I might switch to like a prime lens, which is like a 1.8. Obviously I haven't got anything lower than that, I'm not that good yet, but like, you know, you switch between, and because of the moment that I'm in, this is another part, you know, get what's best for that particular part. Like you said before about that cine lens, looks great, feels great, you feel like you're doing a great job, but it wasn't right for that thing. Possibly, obviously, admittedly to you, you've said that like it was down to, you know, you didn't know, essentially. But it's like, could I go and shoot a whole day's wedding on this old camera and this lens now? Probably. You know, obviously I'd feel more comfortable doing it with my better camera and a better lens system, but it wouldn't stop me, because I know the type, because I've done it that many. Because I've done it that many times, I know what to expect from the day, and what I can push at certain parts, and you know, I could get around it, because I've gone from an entry-level camera to using a good camera, whereas not going from a great camera and not knowing where there's like a next ceiling, or if I went from that to having to start using that, you know, where am I gonna miss? Where am I gonna like think, oh, it's too much, or whatever.
But well, again, there's loads of that I'll agree with, because it's right, and there's also stuff that I'll say I wouldn't do it like that if I didn't have to. Like I shot however long with just a 24-105, and that was more than enough. And then I started shooting with a 5D Mark II, and I kept my original 5D, and I was shooting with a 24-105 and the 70-200. Like, me personally now, I wouldn't shoot a wedding without 2 bodies. I want to know I've got that wide on one side of my shoulder strap and I've got that telephoto on the other. But that's just me. Could I do it without it? If you had to do it without it, of course you would. One of the reasons I'll always go with 2 lenses and 2 cameras is in case one breaks. If I had to shoot an entire wedding on a 70-200, it'd be difficult, but I'd do it.
That is literally the reason why not only this is still here, but just in case, because these things happen. Like, touch wood, it hasn't happened to me yet where my camera's kind of let me down, or a card let me down, or anything like that. But it is purely a backup, because what I was finding when I got the new camera, obviously just get to, I can push it that little bit further to get those better images that I wasn't able to kind of take with this. You know, it become to, I had that on this side and my other camera on this side on like a bit of a harness shoulder strap thing, and I'd find that I was just constantly bringing this camera up on my right hand side, because I knew it would take the better image, because I could push it further in whatever environment I was in. So I stopped actually holding on to this, because by the end of the day, as you've probably experienced yourself, when you've got them both weighing you down, it's like it's pulling your shoulders in and everything. It's quite weighty, especially for the fact that this has got an additional battery grip on that doesn't come with it, and a lens which is quite long, you know, and like that weighty.
It's always amused me over the years when people have asked me for advice on what camera to get, and I stopped giving it because people never listened. Like they just they wanted a certain thing. They didn't want to know, you know, the best of what they this or the best of that. Like someone would go, oh, well, I want this pink one. Well, buy the pink one then. I'm like, you know, you're going to get excellent pictures for what you want.
And that, sorry, just
most of my
sorry, just to interrupt. And that is right. I think you get what you feel comfortable getting, not what you think somebody else has got that you need. So if you like the pink one, get the pink one. If you like the one that's comes with 2 lenses, get the one with 2 lenses. If you like the one that's $5,000, then get the one that's $5,000. Well, I wouldn't advise that, but similar to what you've just said there, when people ask me, like, what do you think? And I say, I can only speak from experience of the camera system that I use, which is mostly Nikon. But like, if it was me, I would recommend this. You know, a small entry level Nikon, because that's what I started. That was my version of the journey. Whereas I think I gave that advice to somebody not too long ago, like last year sometime, and then in the end, when they actually came on, they bought a Sony camera, which is, you know, nothing about what I talked about, but they liked that that's what other people were using or whatever like that, and that's fine. Like, get what you feel comfortable getting, but don't jump too far to the point where it might put you off at a later date. That's, I think, the thing. But sorry, continue.
I don't know, but I think I don't know. I think ultimately, you know, this is we're not the first photographers to have this conversation. We're not the first people to put a video out about it. You know, we're probably, I don't know how many people are going to put like an hour's long rant on about it, but ultimately, yeah, just work with what you've got. I mean, this is not what the point I was just making, but I did say earlier I was going to contradict myself. Work with what you've got. I do, however, seriously believe in certain situations, or I've been in fact told by clients, that looking the part makes a difference for some clients. Like turn up with flight cases. You know, one of my flight cases is shite and it's full of GoPro attachments because I'm sick of never needing them until I don't have one with me.
Yeah,
so it's in the back of the van, never comes out, and it's just full of shite. But the point is that when I go somewhere and I stack up a couple of flight cases and people are like, oh, that looks the part, or, you know, those little bits do matter to some clients. I personally don't think it matters at weddings because people don't really look at that. They look at, for me, one of the best compliments I was ever paid was someone said I didn't even know there was a photographer because I'd just been so stealthy around and not interfering, and until it was the group shots, and that was a great thing for me. But yeah, sometimes not necessarily looking the part as in all the gear, no ID, but how you kind of present yourself matters, and that can be through just having, you know, looking organised with your camera bag and stuff like that, as opposed to having batteries all over the place and cards all over the place and wires all over the place and not fucking looking like you know what you're doing.
And in with that, I think that's equally a good and a bad point. Not for what we're talking about, but for in that particular moment in time. Because typically when I go now, obviously, as I said before, with like a one camera and like some accessories on the other arm, just for easy access and whatever, I don't get as many, like, I won't say compliments, but I don't get many people commenting on like what I look like, i.e. as a setup. Whereas when I had that camera on this side and this camera on that side, I would often, I guess it depends on the guests and where you are and things like that, would get people having a conversation. God, a few grand there, lad, isn't he? Like, what you've also got a context is, and this isn't a bad thing, when you're at these events, most of the time, 98% of the people who are at them, doesn't matter if you're at a wedding, a music event, portrait session, whatever, do not have a clue what you've got in your hand. They've never invested any amount of time whatsoever into photos or videos, so they don't know what the difference between at the time £500, you know, entry level camera is, and a 2,000 whatever it was pound, you know, semi-pro camera that I've kind of got there, or pro, whatever you want to call it. You know, they don't know. Like, they really don't know, and that's good and bad because it takes that pressure. Sometimes, and I've said this to somebody, when I was at other weddings and I was there, and obviously a lot more people do have better cameras nowadays, SLRs all over the place, through hobbyists and whatever, and I was clicking away with this old one, and the shutter sound, the actual sound of the shutter, was putting me off, because I was walking around and like, obviously you're in a wedding, you're in a quiet room, and it's going all over the place. Ignore the impression. Like, it was making me think, oh god, this is like really off-putting now. And you know, people might have been looking and going, wow, his camera's shit, because look at, listen to the sounds of that shutter. If they knew, chances are they don't. And now when you've got this one and it's a bit more silent, has it made any difference to the image quality? No. The actual sound of the shutter, I mean, has it made me feel better? Yeah. But would I be asked now because I'm a bit further down the line, a bit longer in the tooth? No. I would quite happily get this out because it's the end result, and the only two people you've got to really impress is, in a wedding scenario anyway, the bride and groom, or in any scenario, your client, your paying client. They're the only ones that need to know, as an end result, does that fit what I wanted? And if the answer is yeah, then it doesn't matter if you've got it on a throwaway disposable from Max Spielman, or you've got it on a red fucking 25 grand camera. They don't care. They just want it to be what they wanted it.
But it goes the other way for people not understanding as well, because I was at a friend's wedding in Italy a few years back, and the videographer was shooting everything on a Leica. I don't even know what Leica it was, but it was, yeah, it's like this big. I think he had a 50mm lens on it, and he shot this like art piece of a wedding video. A couple of people were asking, or like commented on the camera as if it wasn't that impressive, and I was like, it's fucking Leica. It's one of the most impressive cameras you can get. Do you know what I mean? Just because it doesn't look like a big, massive, expensive SLR, or looks like, you know, Leicas have looked like older style cameras for years, haven't they? It's part of their. I mean, I'd love one. Yeah, and I'd love one, but it's probably definitely, it's never going to happen. But that perception of them, this guy wasn't a cheap videographer at all. Like he wasn't, and obviously his portfolio backed that up, and what he shot on was almost very stylized. He might be able to do everything he ever needs to with that camera, and like for me, again, this is the important thing of your gear. If it does what you need it to do, then it sounds like, you know, there's this whole thing about the holy trinity of lenses, of having a 15 to 35, 24-70 and a 70-200. Like that was in my early days. That's what I strived for. I had a 24-105. But that was an f4. I was like, well, I need a 2.8 24-70. Then I need an ultra wide, and then I need the telephoto. Anyway, not obviously, but I had the 24-105. I had the 70-200, and then I was thinking, well, I need the ultra wide, and I never got it. And at that point in my career, I never needed it. When I started shooting this content a couple of years back, 2.5 years ago now, I bought a 16-35, which was great. It was like a bit of a game changer for me. And I had a 24-105 at the time, because I'd got it as a kit lens when I bought my 5D4. And it just didn't get used. It literally didn't come out my camera bag at all. So typical for me, I just flogged it and invested in other lenses. And I've survived the last 2 and a bit years of shooting on an ultra wide. Now I've got a 15-35 lens and a 70-200.
Sorry, I was just going to say, does that again come back to that topic of, because you understand what you're looking at? Do you know what I mean? Like, all of that you've just explained then made sense to me, because I know to some degree the same lengths and strides that you're going for. But to somebody who's maybe not so well versed or whatever, that would mean like, well, what? You know, everyone gets apps on their phones now, don't they, that do like a fake blurred background, and it's absolutely ridiculous, like a joke in comparison to what we could potentially look at. But in like an average person's eyes, a phone that literally just, you tap the area that you want to be in focus and the rest of it is out, is so manipulated incorrectly to look faded that it's unbelievable. But to the untrained eye, that's like the best picture they've ever took. And that's the level of understanding again. Basically the conclusion to what we've kind of been rambling on about for over an hour is, don't be one of these all the gear and no idea people. Purchase for what you want. So literally look out there and get what you want. Sometimes advice could be given. I think we're quite approachable on the fact that we'd cater to people's needs, so we'd understand that if you're someone who's never shot before, we would quite happily recommend a very, very, entry level camera, and that would do them great, and they will be able to like go with them for whatever it is that they're going to do. You could probably ask the question, what are you going to use it for? If they're not going to be using it for paid work, you could literally get the cheapest SLR you can get your hands on, or mirrorless now.
There's a barbecue account I watch where I've been talking to the fella. He's got like 15,000 followers. He shoots everything on he shoots everything on an iPhone 11 Pro, and he's got it in one of those weird little cages that has like springs or something around it for image stabilization, and he has a little Rode microphone clipped onto himself. That's it. And he produces unbelievable content for his audience. I don't look at that and think, where's the B-roll and the production value and the slow-mo? I look at what he's teaching me and I go, that's fucking brilliant. And he does that with an iPhone. And if he can do that and carve out this niche for himself where he's globally known amongst idiots like me who are obsessed with barbecue and food, with his iPhone that he then goes around and makes all his calls on, that's perfect. You couldn't want any more than to do that, could you? Whereas I'm surrounded by all this gear, and I'm like, I can't be arsed setting up 2 cameras to try and film myself because I'm not going to be able to get the shots I want. And I need lockdown to be lifted so me and you can do something together, so I can do some of the videos I want to do, because I've got it into my head I need people around me to do it. And that's not the case. That's just me making excuses.
I think we all do that though. We all make excuses for what we've got to what we should have, could have, and need. And you I think the further you get down, you make a case for yourself that you need the best to get better, which probably isn't always the case, but it's hard to get that rationale into your own mind.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know talk about that all day.
I don't know whether this will go in, because I know you laughed at me the other day when I said I'd ordered another Canon R5. Because I shoot with 2 cameras and they produce different qualities, that's why I want a second one that matches. Because like this now, with this Ninja, for a test, I'm shooting this in 4K HQ, which apparently is meant to look amazing, but I've not shot in it before. But there's no point me shooting in that if my second camera's not going to produce anything like it.
That makes sense.
And again, because my cameras are in use at the moment with lockdown, not as much as they used to be, but my cameras have probably never been used as much as they have done for the last few years of doing video and stills. So to kind of have my child's messaging me now saying, can I have something to eat, please? I'm not going to put that in. So I'm not going to.
That's how she was starving.
Yeah, I'm not going to put that in. I was just telling you. There's definitely an element of, for me, it's trying to produce something that's matching, and because of the work I do, 2 cameras, if not 3 sometimes, is essential. So I want to get that to match. Anyway, let's wrap it up a different way.
Go ahead. We just do like an outro. Literally just do an outro. No continuous talks. Just thanks very much for coming on to listen to us again. If you have listened, I know we do drone out a little bit, but it is a podcast. AKA it is a conversation. And sometimes with conversations, they don't always end when you plan them to. Hopefully, if you've spent the time to listen to us.
So just to interrupt, Ryan's conversation should have ended when his daughter was crying outside the door for trying to get in.
Banging at the door. Yeah, that's what mine should have ended. And it will. And I'm going to go through them now and see what the problem was. But basically, yeah, we want obviously this to be a thing. I think at the moment, more than anything, it's just for a chance for us to kind of communicate, talk about our loves for what we do, and plan for things, what we could do in future. If somebody finds that there's a bit of interest in that, and that there's a little bit of community to be gained about sharing ideas, sharing best practice, which will come in later episodes, I'm sure, and about everything to do with photography and video, it'd be worth the watch. So we just appreciate anyone who spent any amount of time, even if it's one person. We appreciate it. I'm sure Clark.
But again, this is, no, I totally disagree. No, only listen. But this is the important thing of, like we're saying, we're doing this for something to do, because we've, I mean, I'm lucky I've been out working. I'm really lucky with that. Like that I'm still out doing things involved in photography. But we could have kept putting this off and kept putting this off and kept putting this off till we were sat in the same room, or till we were out on a hillside, or till. It's important to just get things done sometimes. Like I'm going to use last week's episode. If anyone watched it, quality-wise was fucking awful. this week's, fingers crossed, if this has worked, should be better because we're filming separately. We're going to sync it together. It's gonna look a lot better. But just get something done, whatever it is, get it done. Ryan will tell you he's the king of shooting stuff and not putting it out there for people to see. But at least he's doing something and he's practicing it, trying to get it right.
That's it.
So just get something done.
Get it done, and get it done with what you've got. That's the key message.
Yeah, I want to see someone who's just got a potato going and getting it done.
Yeah, go and get it done. And share what you've just done. If you've listened to what we've just said throughout all of that, you've spent that time. You might even put markers on to say skip to this point for this, skip to this point for this. But if you listen to that last sentence, then of use what you've got and get it done, and you've got an idea, go out, get it done, and share it with us. Share it with like this little mini community we're trying to create. Send it to us on a DM. You know, send us a link to it so we can see what you've got and what you've got done with it. Because you'd surprise yourself. You know, you're probably thinking, I don't want to send it to anyone because it's shit. Whereas you're marking your own homework. I've spoken about this before. Give it to somebody a different person. It doesn't have to be someone who knows a thing or two about it. Just give it to somebody else and let them tell you what they think. You'd be surprised. But we'll end it there.
Well said. Well said. This is a joint podcast, by the way. I know Ryan likes to fucking railroad it like he's he's presenting it.
I disagree.
No, I'm only messing. Yeah, sweet. I'm happy with that. Let's hope I can hack that down though, because that's about an hour and 20 minutes.